The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all the ships at sea. Thank you so much for joining us on another exciting Page One Power webinar. In these shows, we typically explore a single topic relevant to the online search and marketing community, including your questions from the audience. And today is no different. Our topic centers around site prospecting, specifically for link building outreach purposes. Please follow us on Twitter at @PageOnePower and follow the global webinar conversation with this webinar's hashtag P1P webinar. But before we dive into it, let's introduce our panel, shall we? I am Colin Eggleston, your friendly neighborhood marketing events coordinator here at Page One Power, and joining us today is one of my esteemed colleagues, Devin Boudreaux, one of our link building experts, rather. Thank you for joining us today, Devin.
Hi.
a man of many words there. So, Devin, you've been with Page One Power, gosh, almost 4 years now.
Almost five.
Almost 5 years now. How'd you get started in kind of in link building and the SEO? What's kind of tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, prior to working here, I actually worked at a little internet marketing startup, and I was primarily in charge of social media community management, and I'd been doing that for about a year, and we started having clients come through asking us about SEO, more specifically like on-page SEO, and just wanting to rank better, and no one there really knew a whole lot about it, so I was kind of given the task of have fun, figure it out, hopefully it helps. So then I took some Lynda courses and just kind of reading online and got the keys to our clients' websites and started playing around, and they started ranking better. And then from there I started working here, and then kind of more specifically learned about link building, and then kind of just went from there, learning from practical experience, keeping up with news and articles and talking with other people within the industry.
Nice. I know there's a lot to, I had a pretty similar experience myself. There's so much to learn and so much to know. I mean, it was just kind of such an overwhelming wealth of knowledge, information, misinformation, and all of the above and everything in between. So today, let's add some information out there to the World Wide Web. And for this webinar, please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation by using the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar interface. We would love to see what questions everybody has. We're going to do a short kind of slide deck here, but this isn't going to be kind of like one of those just full slide deck presentations. We want to actually do some live site prospecting on the air, so it's going to be a short deck followed by some live prospecting and some questions and answers. So we'd love to hear from you today. So the journey of 1,000 links really kind of begins with a single question. Where are the sites that would want to link to me? Right? Where are they, and how do we find them? So in today's Link Building Live, we are on part 2, site prospecting. We want to find people that are interested in our awesomeness. So the tools of our trade, and there's obviously many more, but these are kind of the ones that some of the hallmarks that we use here at Page One Power. Devin, tell us a little bit about these, about the tools that you use on a daily basis to kind of help prospect.
I honestly use, my favorite tool is Google. It's all the sites are there, generally speaking. I'll use SEMrush once I find sites to kind of just go through and see, is this site good? Is it bad? Are people actually even going to this website? What kind of keywords are they ranking for? It also lets you see competitors and a lot of other information, but that's, once I find a site, that's kind of my go-to. A little quick, hit the Chrome extension for it and just see if it's even a good target. I'll use Majestic a lot for pulling backlink reports and kind of seeing what kind of links are our competitors getting, what strategies are they using. But generally for site finding, I'm going to primarily stick to Google. Google has everything that I need to find sites.
It really does, and a lot of tools can kind of help maybe with some efficiencies or maybe some specific types of site finding strategies, which we'll kind of cover today. But Yeah, that's one of the things that always surprises people the most, because I did a lot of training of kind of remote training for other clients, for clients outside of Patron Power and people that want to buy our training services, which are available. So please talk to us about those if you're interested. But one of the things that gets the biggest surprise out of people is like they'll sit us down in a session and they'll say, "Okay, tell us how you find all these sites." And the first thing I say is, "All right, let's go to Google." And then they're like, "What? Google? I thought there was some big secret proprietary, software that we're keeping to ourselves." But honestly, Google, it does search well. It does search well, and we haven't really tried to top it yet. So we just use Google. For the most part. I also am a huge fan of using Twitter and other social media to kind of find certain types of sites, but yeah, that's Google is definitely part of that mix. So one of the things, Devin, too, is Patron Power, finding that relevance and kind of drawing that line between what a client may do in their business versus trying to find sites that are kind of relevant to that. What is your kind of go-to way to kind of find relevance, and how do you kind of think about that concept?
One of the ways I'll think about it is simply as, if this client's website was my website, would I want my site to have a link on XYZ sites? I think that just having that mentality is going to help big time. Generally speaking, I'll look at specific keywords or whatever niche that they're in for relevancy, but I think that sometimes you don't want to get too hung up on relevancy more than user experience or just overall site usage. There's lots of super hyper relevant websites, but maybe they don't really have active users or people really aren't using them anymore, but you can find a smaller site that is relevant, but people are actually actively using that site. To me, that's going to be a better site to get a link on.
There's a lot of really good ways to kind of approach that, and it's it's easy to kind of get, and I do this all the time, but it's easy to get caught up in topical sameness and topical one-to-one. So one thing that is for let's say our client is a wedding photographer, right? So a relevant, if you're thinking kind of one-to-one, then I'm going to look at all these photography enthusiast websites and maybe camera buying guide websites and sites that talk about that, and arts and crafts and art, other types of things like that. But you know what? If I'm a wedding photographer, I might also want links from wedding caterers, right? Wedding florists, people that have nothing to do with photography in kind of a one-to-one comparison, but is very relevant to my business model, and also relevant to my audience. So it's really easy to kind of really get kind of trapped in that one-to-one. But if you zoom out a little bit and look at what your audience is also doing, what are your consumers also searching for? I think that's a good way to look at it too.
Yeah, if you're looking for a wedding caterer and you're on their website and you saw they had a resources page of additional services, for instance, and you went on there and you saw they had a wedding photographer, you might have a little light bulb go off, oh, we actually need one of those also. I'm just going to click on this and take the journey that way, versus if you're on a photography-specific website and you saw a list of photographers listed, yeah, it's relevant, but what's the likelihood that you're actually going to click on it and find that valuable? Maybe not quite as high.
The user experience is really important, and that kind of brings us to kind of the value of a link in and of itself, because at Patron Power, we one of the values that we really kind of impress upon our links and in our conversations about links is that links for search engines are all fine and good, and that's a entirely different kind of topic, but links for the user and links for your audience and links for for people to actually use and leverage and make buying decisions, that's a really powerful force, which definitely kind of helps guides our efforts. So metrics. So I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with between training, between clients, client-facing duties, project management, where a lot of people get really caught up in metrics like, oh, can you find me only sites that are 40 DA, 50 DA and higher? Talk about some metrics that you kind of look for, Devin, that maybe help guide your decisions.
I'll look at if people are actually using the site and if people are actually visiting the site, and just overall like user experience and like niche relevancy to a point. But I'm not super hung up on like, oh, the DA needs to be this high or it needs to have X amount of traffic.
Mm-hmm.
It varies literally from industry to industry. You can maybe only have a couple hundred people visiting your site a month, but within your industry, that's a lot. Whereas you could have a super competitive niche where, even if you have 5,000 people going to your site, that might not be that many.
Mm-hmm.
To where there's so many specific variables and things that vary that's kind of, I wouldn't necessarily put a certain like, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. These are the specific things you need to look at, more as you need to kind of be able to adapt it to whatever niche you're in, and then look at those type of metrics within that.
What type of tool do you typically use when you're checking for usage on a particular site?
I'll use SEMrush. It rocks. Yeah. Super easy to use.
That is very true. We do enjoy SEMrush around here. One thing that I always look for, because this kind of handful of metrics, we always like to look for, is the link crawlable, right? And that's not necessarily a deal breaker as long as like if it's not getting crawled, but maybe if people are using it, or if there is some other metric there, or if there's some other usage kind of end user thing, then that's good. But we typically like to make sure it's crawlable because usually if it's crawlable, if it shows up in search engines, if it shows up in search, then people are going to see it and there's going to be more traffic usually. Now the correct anchor text, now I've specifically put in there not misspelled and things like that, not necessarily, because a lot of times as far as like asking for anchor text, specific anchor text gets tricky, but it's more important to say like, hey, if you're going to link to my wedding photography brand, can you just make sure that it's spelled correctly and things like that. And then do follow, there's kind of an asterisk there too, because again, it's about the user experience. But typically we like to check and make sure there either do follow signals. But again, that's definitely not a deal breaker. And ultimately for the user's benefit there. And here's some other metrics, kind of looking at the site. So like if I'm just plucking the site out of the ether and I want to kind of evaluate it and see what are some factors that kind of go into whether or not I may outreach to it and kind of begin a relationship. These are some of the things that you look for. I don't know, what can you talk to on this list that you kind of look for, Devin?
I'll look for relevance. I'll look at the number of inbound links if I pull up in like Majestic, and maybe the site looks like it, in theory, is a good site, but then has a gigantic list of backlinks coming from only a few domains, and then looking at the backlinks they're getting, and if they're all just kind of like spammy garbage, I don't want my link on there. I'll look at traffic. It's always a big thing, but like as I was saying earlier, it's gonna vary from niche to niche that you're in. But that's something, I mean, if it's a straight flat line of traffic and no one's ever going to the site, it might have some explicit like SEO value for like the robots and whatnot, but from an actual user experience, there really isn't very much value. I mean, honestly, like, there's lots of metrics you can go in to look into, but for me, site finding, the biggest thing I'm going to look at is, are people actually using the site? Is it user-friendly, and is it going to be relevant and make sense for the users and for the site to be linked to it in the first place?
I think that's a terrific way of saying it. The one last thing that I'll kind of sign off on the metrics decision is a topic is always look for neighborhoods. Like, is my link on this, if it's a relevant page, the title tags look good, the domain looks good, there's other signs of life, there's traffic. But if my client might be listed on a list of resources, but then 2 paragraphs down, there's links to like gambling or sketchy supplements, then that's pretty much a deal breaker for me. And so I always kind of look for that, because all the other things could be right, but there might be something like that will, at least me personally, will kind of step back a little bit.
There's one other thing that I have found really helpful when finding sites to check is simply look on the page and see if when was the last time it was even updated. A lot of sites will have that listed, or I'll go to either their news section or like their blog, and you'll find a lot of times like sites might be getting traffic, they might be user friendly, they might be relevant, but the sites just aren't being updated anymore. And at that point, why waste your time even sending outreaches to these sites when the likelihood your link's going to go up is extremely, extremely low, if any possibility, to where that's another, like, it's not like technically like a metric per se, but I think that's something really important to look at in your site finding.
Oh yeah, well, it's kind of in kind of the meta there, where it's like, well, all signals kind of look good, but as far as like, can I build a relationship with a site that no one's updating? That's a trickier question. So Google search, we kind of talked about Google search as kind of one of the biggest ones that we kind of use for prospecting. So we like to use in a fancy way of saying is like we like to use the Boolean search arguments and modifiers like this. So in URL is probably my favorite go-to. If you really just learn one, it's in URL. And Devin probably has a different experience, but I just love in URL, at least as kind of like a basis before, is like a yellow belt before you get to your black belt. So if I'm looking for a site, like if I am let's just keep with the wedding photographer. So if I'm a wedding photographer, I want to find resource pages where people are adding lists of reputable wedding photographers to their website. I like to look for in URL : resource, and then the phrase, wedding photographers or catering, even like kind of catering keywords, or photography, recommended vendors, things like that. What's your take on that, on in URL?
I think it's great. If your site is like structured and set up properly, your URLs aren't going to be super crazy and they're not going to be confusing. They're supposed to be user-friendly and very easy to understand, to where just putting something as simple as in URL keyword or in URL links, resource, things like that, the good sites are going to come up that way.
And I'll just show, since we are doing link building live, this is one of my, is just basically doing in URL. Let's just do links actually. Let's just try that and see what we have here. So as you can see, these top results, so we have a straight up links list page right here on wedding photography by Amelia, Flynn photography /info/wedding links. So that's what the in URL is going to do. The in URL, if you haven't really messed with it before, this search argument basically guarantees, all but guarantees that all of your search results are going to have the word links in the URL. And so you can actually kind of find that. So if you're looking for links, resources is another really good one. So whatever your kind of industry is, this is a really good way to kind of get off the ground. And now what Google basically just populated to us is 74,000 sites that we can outreach to potentially, because these are all these 74,000 sites link lists, links lists that we can kind of learn more about, and possibly make that outreach decision. But right now we're kind of in the data gathering phase, right? So that's kind of one way I would use it. In URL links, wedding photographer would be a good one to kind of find those links lists. Let's go back to the deck here. In title, tell me about in title. I've used this one a little bit less, but I think you mentioned that you might use a little bit more.
I use it more whenever you're trying to find like a page about something specifically. Like we'll use the wedding photographer example. I would do quotes like wedding photographer in title recommended vendors or in title, just any keyword related to their niche. I feel like that is going to pull things up. Is they might not necessarily have the URL use a keyword, but within the title of the page telling people this is what the page is about, it's going to be there generally, I've noticed.
Right. So yeah, if it's
kind of telling you what the page is about, more or less.
Yeah, if a reputable site owner took time to optimize their optimize titles, then it's going to show up. Whatever we're looking for should show up there. And then we like to use quotes as well to kind of find something that's an exact a quote. Words in that exact order can get tricky, especially. I like the minus sign. The minus excludes the word that you're subtracting. So if you want to find out about salsa, but you're looking for the condiment and not the type of dance style, which is very fun, but we're not searching for that right now, then you minus dancing, or you can minus several other things. I've seen, so you can do minus a domain. So like if I'm looking for even like in the wedding photography or even in other niches, like if it's related to a product that other big vendors sell, like Walmart or Amazon, then you want to minus those domains so that those domains are excluded from your search results, because those can really kind of spam up and put a lot of chaff in your search results. So I like to minus those out. Do you use minus a lot?
I use it a lot when I'm doing like branded fresh mention searches. I'll usually subtract minus the actual client's website.
Mm.
Because a lot of the mentions are going to come from their own site, so I don't really care about that. But in terms of like finding like resource pages and like things of that nature, I haven't used it a ton lately. I have in the past, but I've gotten pretty like comfortable and proficient in just doing like in URL and in title and kind of just going through and kind of just picking out like, oh, I don't want to go to this site, I don't want to go to that site, I'll just kind of skip through them. I don't like having super long search strings.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, I've had pretty long ones, and I've ended up kind of getting myself confused more or less to where I try to keep them pretty simple. And I figure if the site is set up properly and it's created, or not created, but written in a way for users to find and be user-friendly, I feel like you don't have to have these crazy search strings to find it. It's going to be set up properly and pretty easy to find and simple.
Right. Yeah, keeping it simple is easier said than done in a lot of aspects, but I think in this your ROI will really kind of improve. One of the things too is like so there might be a lot of instances, like if your client sells like a safety product or something that's more kind of like public health, like like maybe a type of pepper spray, for like a bear spray, so for like campers and hikers and things like that. Well, sometimes .gov sites may recommend private companies, or there might be a list of like, well, if you need some sort of safety equipment, this is the safety equipment that we recommend, or here's some people that might recommend it. So you might want to look for a .gov site. So I love searching for like site colon. If you're looking for .gov, you can look for anywhere, any site that'll basically pull up a .govs, which is really useful. And then you can use site colon as well to just search a single domain. So like in the example there, if I'm going to look for just grilled cheese sandwich recipes on the site yumly.co, then I would use that search argument right there. So site colon is really helpful, especially if they don't have a search bar. And you need to find something on that site really quickly, and you need to find a resource page or maybe a specific product or something like that, then the site colon is a really good way to go. Let's see. So we kind of talked about active, kind of active searching through Google, kind of using those search phrases. Passive site finding is a thing as well that I like to employ. Using kind of passive. Not all these are really passive necessarily, but like Google News, like Google Mentions, Google Alerts is a really good way to kind of passively find brand mentions. Like if you're working for a client that has a relatively high, high profile brand name, then I will absolutely throw a couple of Google alerts and get those set up for whenever my client is mentioned, and then I can go investigate and do a type of link building that I really like is basically finding unlinked mentions, and so that's a good way to do it. Google Trends. Google Trends isn't necessarily for finding alerts or mentions of clients per se, but if I'm searching for, like, if my client is a wedding photographer and I want to see, okay, are people searching more for the phrase wedding photographer or wedding or wedding photographer or like wedding videographer or something like that? And how do I want to, which is a more popular search and which might have better results, more relevant results? Then I'll compare those two search terms on Google Trends. I don't know. What do you like to use with these, Devin?
Out of those, personally, I like mention.com the most. I actually used it the other day, and it brought up a ton of results that I couldn't even find simply by doing some Google searches.
Yeah.
It pulled up a lot of, like, I don't want to say weird sites, but just sites that I was like, wow, I work with a lot of hospitality and like accommodations clients, and they pulled up a lot of sites that are like very industry serving, like, and I was like, wow, I've never even heard of these sites, and I went to them and they were actually really good sites with like good metrics, good user experience. People are using them. So I was like, that's kind of weird that I've never seen these before. So I'm a big fan of that one. I've used most of these. I feel like with a lot of the Google stuff, unless your brand is being talked about a lot or you're a more like higher level business, it's going to definitely be a more passive thing. Like you might not get that many mentions, but if you're like a big name, there's no reason why you shouldn't be like utilizing as many different options as you have to find out about your mentions, because every one of those could be a potential opportunity, or you can even, maybe people are saying things about your brand that you didn't know about.
Yeah, it's really advantageous because we've had the pleasure to work with some enterprise level brands that definitely, if you plug them into Google, you're going to get a lot of results for that brand name and consistently updated results. And I find Google News is actually really good as well. If you are trying to find maybe even a certain product, sometimes that product will pop up in the news, or even a brand name as well. Or one of my favorite ways to do this is forget about the name of the company, but if you have a Google News search or Google alert for the C-suite executives in the company, people that are public facing of that company, because someone might mention that person in an article or a think piece or an offhanded reference or something like that, then you can actually go and request that person, that the author say like, hey, thanks so much for mentioning for mentioning this person. This is their company. Here's more. Obviously, they might know, but then they may not have linked actually to the company, and so that's a great opportunity to kind of go in and kind of acquire that link.
There's also a lot of cool tools that are not listed. It just cued my thought. At my last job, doing the social media stuff, there's a bunch of really cool tools you can use to get social media mentions, where it tracks everything, and a lot that'll potentially give you some good opportunities of unlinked mentions where they might not even been picked up by Google yet. They could be like real time, had just come up. People are talking about your brand. You get instant results to that. That's another thing that you can potentially look into using or just doing.
Absolutely. So it's kind of just the regular Google search with search operators is great, but there's a lot of other ways that you can kind of use Google's other kind of products as well. And I just want to do just real quick. Let's X out of that. I just want to do kind of Google Trends. Is kind of just show the audience. I don't know if everybody's really familiar with this. So one of the things that I really like to, kind of use in my site finding and my link building efforts is I like to make decisions for my brand and for my company that are based on empirical results. So like I don't want to just start, just kind of typing out keywords that I may think are relevant to my industry, but I don't really know. And so, like if you are, if you want to do something like, what do people search more for? Coke or Pepsi? Versus soft drink, Coca-Cola, and then we can compare, like, okay, compare that to Pepsi. PepsiCo, Pepsi, there we go. So we can see, looks like we got a little bit of a spike there for Pepsi.
When that commercial came out.
Could have been related to that, so you can kind of see that. But even then, so at that time, it was almost double the number of searches for Pepsi products. So that could be a really good opportunity for for link building, possibly. But you can kind of see, okay, these are the two terms that I'm looking at, and you can kind of see their popularity over time. And so obviously, then at this point, we would want to go with the one that is more popular, the one that is getting more searches globally, and then you can kind of select your region and maybe kind of isolate it by region. Because if your clients are pretty much only within the United States, then you're going to see different kind of search results there. So looks like Wyoming, Wyoming is a Pepsi state. Wyoming, Colorado. There we go. Two great Pepsi states there. So, so you can kind of see, you can narrow down that search results and kind of go through and kind of make informed decisions based on empirical data that Google's giving us for free as well, which is great. So I just really enjoy trends. I think it's a really good way to kind of choose between, if you're on the fence between 2 or 3 different keywords, and you want to know, you only have a limited amount of time to do your link building campaign, which we all do in some respects, then using that is a really good way to kind of narrow down those decisions.
You should pay us now for that Pepsi thing.
If those guys, if they want to, kickbacks are definitely welcome, for sure. So for backlink analysis, okay, so this is where we leave Google behind, right? It's kind of scary to say, but we leave Google behind, and I love backlinking. Like, I'm such a huge fan of backlinking, because backlinking begets spreadsheets. And spreadsheets is really is kind of an environment where I'm most comfortable. And with the sorting and sorting and all the other kind of functions as far as like formula, you can really kind of harness that data in a lot more efficient fashion than say just through Google results, because you can't really sort the Google results per se. Obviously, there's advanced search functions where you can. How do you use backlink analysis, Devin?
I like to use it to get an idea of what are my competitors doing in terms of just link building strategy in itself. You can go through a backlink report list, whatever you want to call it. But you can just go through and start to look at what kind of links are they getting, what kind of pages are they getting links on, and just kind of start to analyze what are they doing. You can also look at what keywords they're using through that. One thing that one of our coworkers, Taylor Tamita, actually showed me the other day, it was pretty cool, is just simply pulling up the code on a page gives you some really good ideas of what are some keywords people are using just in their like meta descriptions that you might not necessarily have thought of, or might have not necessarily shown up through like SEMrush or things like that. But I mean, generally speaking, when I pull a backlink report, I'm going to be looking at the actual URL and then just the keywords and kind of trying to see like what's going on here. It also, I mean, gives you good opportunities of where should I be linked, and also where do I not want to be linked that they're getting links on. And you can start to see some more sketchy, shady stuff that people have done in the past and or currently are doing. And I mean, it just gives you a good glimpse into what is everyone else doing link building wise.
Exactly. I mean, like if you are, one of the things I really like to use backlink analysis for, and I usually we typically use Majestic and Moz as well for kind of going through. So I kind of have these pulled up. So one of the things I like to go through is if I'm backlinking my competitor, I like to see where where are they getting links from? What types of sites are they? And then I compare that list to my clients list of backlinks, and I see, are there any opportunities? Are there any opportunities for getting links? So like one of the things I always look for is I like to go through the backlink data, and I like to download it to a spreadsheet, and I go through and I search for, I just do a search, do a find in or even like a sort, like a column sort. Oh yeah, Click Hunter is great.
Big fan.
Very, very good. You can compare backlink. You can compare several backlink lists or subdomains actually, or no subdomains of domains through this at once. And actually, it's pretty cool. But what I like to go through is I'll download the backlink report of my top competitors. So 3, 4, 5 backlink reports, and I'll go through. I can even combine them into one single sheet, which is a little bit of an extra step. But I just like to go through and I look at the linking URL column in the linking URL column, and I search that column for things like blog, link list, resources.
Filter by keyword.
Filter all those keywords. So if I sort it by blog, that means that they have a link from a blog post, and so that might be an opportunity for me to then go and talk to that site, see if we can write, write for them, or kind of or tell them about some of our content, so that it's like, hey, my client, you might be interested in this. My client has a similar product or similar service. And here's this really cool piece of content that they made on their site, and you might want to link to it as well. One of my other favorite examples too is looking for lists of competitors where if somebody is listing like 5 or 6 companies that are 5 or 6 wedding vendors, and here's a blog post I'm writing about 5 or 6 wedding vendors in my area, and I find that my competitor is on that list but I'm not, then I might outreach to that author and say, hey, looks like I'm also a wedding photographer in this area, and here's some background about us. We think that we should be included. We'd love to be included in that list. Please ask me if you have any questions, and then typically we will get a link and add it to that list as well.
Another really cool thing you can do with backlinking that I'm a big fan of is finding broken sites that aren't there anymore, dead sites, and throwing those into Majestic and pulling up their backlink report and finding all of the good links that they have that people are linking to, where you have a dead and broken resource, and hitting them up and being like, hey, this doesn't work anymore, but my site does, so you should replace that with this link instead. You can, at that point you can kind of sell them or explain why it makes sense and why your site's a good replacement. But that's a pretty easy, pretty surefire way to get links. I get a lot of links that way.
So I'm just doing, Nike.com is kind of one of my go-to examples because they have tons and tons of links. So I'm just doing a fresh index of Nike. I like to do the root domain here, make sure that's selected, and then I like to export that typically into CSV or Excel. Really, either one is fine. Or actually on Google Sheets, but if you export it to Google Sheets, it will sometimes it'll truncate it if it's a larger list. So we want to for this 30,000 list, we usually want to do an Excel if it'll download it.
Excel rocks.
Is that not? So it looks like it's being a little bit slow, but it's usually a lot more responsive than that. So hopefully that will download it soon. But so on this list, I was hoping to show us if it actually downloads. If it actually downloads, oh, something has gone wrong. Sorry, Majestic. Looks like we upset Majestic. Let's go back here and try that again, shall we?
Another cool thing with simply going through competitor backlinks and analysis is you get to have a good idea of within your industry, what are people doing as a whole. Maybe you have a client comes in and they're like, oh, we really want resource links, like we really, really want them, that's what we need. And you analyze all of your top ranking competitors and as well as some like middle level sites, and you can, maybe resource links aren't really that viable in your industry. People aren't getting that way, they're not ranking that way. So in that turn, you can either have a potential opportunity of, well, let's create some pages, let's create some content on our site where we can actually stand out and be really unique compared to everyone else and kind of take the reins on that and get links that way. Or maybe it's not a thing that your industry really just does. And at that point, it's like, well, let's think about something else. You'll see some industries where a lot of the links come from either just various promotional things or content pieces and not really as much quote-unquote link building.
I always like to bold the top row here. So for a majestic report like this, I like to go ahead and just hit filter, just go to data, hit filter here, and then my secret for kind of getting a search that will really just kind of eliminate the results, eliminate the chaff, is I like to go ahead and just do a search in this particular column, column A, source URL specifically, because that's going to have the longest URL chain with all the folders and all that. And I just search this column for something like, let's just do like resource, right? And see all the resource lists that Nike. If I'm reading a word, then I'll just say it if I'm talking. So that Nike has been listed on. So now we have this entire list here. So out of this 30,000 line sheet. So let's see how many lines. Let's see, is it going to show me? Let's just go to the top here, and so that's 140 right there. So that's 140 resource pages that Nike is listed on. So now, a little bit better than a Google search, I have these 140 resource pages that Nike is listed on, and then I can go and sort them by other metrics. So I can look at their, I can look at the source domain and trust flow, or citation flow and trust flow. So I can sort it by that. So if I want to, if I want to say, okay, what's the best citation flow that we can get, or trust flow, if you want to kind of do that as well. So we can say, okay, well, I'll just go down this list and maybe start kind of eliminating these sites. And if this isn't, if they aren't sites that we want to link from, then I just go down my list, and I would typically will just mark it red if I'm not going to, use it or whatnot. So that's what I really like to do with this. Same thing for blogs. I bet Nike's going to have a lot of mentions for blogs too. It's pretty easy to kind of link to Nike if you're kind of blogging about that stuff. So here's the blogs that are talking about Nike, and there we go. So we have this list. So we have it narrowed down to 3,144 different blog mentions for Nike that have linking back to somewhere on Nike's domain. So again, this is a really great way if you're prospecting to really kind of scale and kind of turbocharge, because honestly, like, you could then just copy and paste this list and email it to somebody, and they can go through and vet it and just have them start vetting and then start even outreaching, right? So then you can continue to then go through and find more and more sites and build these outreach lists. Devin, anything to kind of jump in there, add on that?
I'm a big fan of deleting stuff out of the backlinks that are just kind of garbage, to be honest.
Right.
Sites that these aren't good targets, or there's no way I'm gonna get a link on here based on my resources, or just restrict, or whatever the case may be, to where I'll generally filter it by those keywords, and then I'll just completely remove them because I don't want to deal with them again as I'm throwing out additional filters, checking for certain pages. I just want those gone. They're not giving me any value. Just get rid of them. I'll also I'll kind of go through. I've been doing it more lately, but I'll actually look at the link type over here, and see, if it's an image link, what's the likelihood that I'm gonna get my client on there? Like, it's gonna be lower. I'll look at the URL at that point and kind of see. But generally speaking, that's just like another thing I'm starting to look at more with some of our higher level clients. We've had a lot of success with doing image related stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I know you had this. So that's as far as the slide deck. That's the end of the slide deck here. So we got 15 minutes into. Let's just kind of look and see kind of QAs. So from the audience, just kind of looking through some questions in the audience. So Jordan mentions that Ahrefs is a tool that allows you to do exactly what you're doing manually. Yes. No, absolutely, Jordan. We love Ahrefs, but typically we've been using kind of Majestic and Moz thus far. But no, absolutely, Ahrefs is incredible and can do everything, if not more. I actually haven't checked it out in a while either. Let's see. Okay, another question. So a question from Rob. So this is a little bit less to do with prospecting, but we can answer this one. So Rob asks, when contacting potential websites to get a link from, would you call them or email them? Well, a little bit of both. What do you say, Devin?
I'd email them. Yeah. Honestly, like if you're calling them, it depends like the level of site that you're hitting up. But let's say you're contacting like a small business site. If you're trying to get a link on a small business related website, if you called them, the likelihood that they built their own website or would even know what you're talking about is pretty low. So yeah, I would honestly just email them. I mean, most of the people that if you're emailing them are going to have at least a better idea, and generally on the site, on a well put together site, you'll hope that you can either find some type of webmaster or editor or like marketing or just something along those lines, so when you hit them up for a link request, they'll know what you're talking about, and you don't have to like try to like be shady and like kind of like hide like what you're actually doing. Like you can be pretty upfront about, hey, this is what I want, this is what I'm doing, etc., and it'll make sense. So where generally I wouldn't personally call them. I've tried that a couple of years ago and it was a dead end for me, so I just kind of stopped.
A question here from Chris. What is DA, please? You know what? Thank you so much for reminding us, Chris. We just toss that back and forth all the time, every day. What is domain authority or DA? I just ruined it. What is DA, Devin?
It's the domain authority of your website.
But it's from specifically, it's a Moz metric, and it's kind of now I don't want to speak out of turn necessarily, but I believe it was kind of a way to kind of get a similar gauge that page rank when PageRank was public facing for that glorious while, and kind of a similar way. So domain authority looks at a lot of factors, but it looks at how many links are pointing to a particular domain, and then how many links are they pointing to, are pointing to them, things like that. So it's a link-based metric used by Moz, and it's called domain authority, and so it's pretty popular. And it's a good little gauge to kind of, if you look at a site and if you literally have 30 seconds to glance at a site and you can just take one thing away from it, DA is a pretty good little thing to look at. So should I go after? So we have a question from Alexander. Should I go after links from high DA websites, but it would have no follow? So that's the thing, is that with DA, we don't typically, we like to look at DA just as kind of like a part of the mosaic of whether or not to target a site, but DA is not really a deal breaker for us necessarily, because a low DA site, like a 10 or below, a low DA site, that could just mean that site is new, right? So there's a time where Nike's site was a DA 5 or 10 for a while, right? And so maybe getting links from lower DA sites over time, that authority is going to build, and it's basically kind of like investing. And so, kind of getting that authority building, the traffic, the user engagement is going to build over time. So in a lot of ways, a low DA link might be more valuable over time than a higher DA link as well. The other thing I like to look at, everyone gets caught up in DA, I like to look at page authority, or PA. Right, so if I'm looking at, in your tiny homes example here, Devin, then we can kind of like transition into this too. So if we go to Moz, because I don't know if my Moz toolbar is not on at the moment. So if we go to Moz, and we might have to log in, we'll just go through here. And so Devin has this pulled up here. This is a resource page for tiny house builders and whatnot, builders, authors, all that fun stuff. And so this is a resource page, and I want to see, I'm asking, do I want my client, if my client is builds tiny houses, do I want to, do I want to get a link from this page? Well, we'll look at the pages, look at the site's domain authority and the page authority. And so right here, it's showing that the page authority is actually 1, but let's see if we can let's see if we can do another search on that, see if that'll update it. But that might have, that could be an interesting sign. So if we have a 48 domain authority, which is pretty high, but if this links list is only showing a page authority of 1, what do you think, Devin?
I still think it's good.
He still thinks it's good? And I think
it is.
I
mean, the page itself is super relevant.
Right.
There's tons of good keywords. It's people are, if you pull this up in SEMrush, people are definitely using this site.
Is this here it is. So what's that traffic? 32,000?
It's big.
Yeah.
People are going to this site to where I mean, like I've said before, I'm always thinking about like user experience and users, and people are using the site. I mean, it's very topically relevant. And another nice thing, a little side factoid about that page is, look, if you go to the page itself,
right here, yep.
Look at all those other sites you can potentially hit up for links.
Yep. So there's a lot of really good. So a link list is not just a good kind of outreach target, but a link list can also help you springboard to other searches and other, making other connections as well. Rob's asking, what are the 3 Ps from an earlier slide? The 3 Ps, we refer to them here, is 3 things that if a site contains any reference to or links from or links to the 3 Ps, we will disregard it and not contact it for a link. And the 3 Ps are pills, poker, and pornography. Basically, like pills meaning like kind of shady, like your cheap Cialis from Canada or whatnot, or Viagra or whatnot. So those types of pills. Poker, not poker specifically, not to single out poker specifically, but other types of online gambling, and then of course pornography is pretty self-explanatory there.
Further about this page is we've had a client within this niche, and most of the sites I found were pages like this. Those are the kind of links I went after. They saw an extremely high upward trend of traffic. They were getting way more people on their site, to where generally speaking these kind of sites rock and these kind of pages make sense, to where I stand by going after.
Well, it has. So that's the thing, is and I think that's a really great lesson as far as looking at third-party metrics like Moz's page authority, domain authority, and maybe making a decision arbitrarily based on that piece of data alone, as opposed to traffic and the other kind of mosaic of data points that we have. So we have a couple other questions here. So a lot of great questions, everybody. Please, thank you so much for your questions today. A lot of great engagement. And so Rob asks, do you directly ask for a link on first contact? That conversation could go a couple of ways, but a lot of times it's more efficient to kind of lean towards the link in the first contact, because people are busy. People are busy, and they don't necessarily want to like wait 2 or 3 correspondences to kind of find out if we want to, have a link engagement with their website. And so one of the things that we recommend is basically saying like if I'm writing an email to this tinyhousetalk.com and I want to get my tiny house client on this site, I'll say hey, webmaster at tinyhousetalk.com. Looks like I found a really great links list here. That's a great resource for tiny houses and tiny house enthusiasts. Well, I want to let you know about this company, XYZ tinyhouse.com builders, and they're a great builder. They're certified, blah blah blah. So I'll tell them a couple things that make the client stand out, some USPs, some unique selling propositions about the client, and say, I would love a link. I would love for them to be added to this page, right? And then it's up to them. then that's basically it. You say, thanks so much for your time. If you have any questions, please let me know. And it's a short email, and you can basically tell them that you want to link on the page. Here's a great addition to it, and here's why. And then it's just kind of a easy touch point. Because we don't want to waste anyone's time. And if the site owner says, well, I took a look at the site that you showed me. I don't really think it deserves to be on this list, or I just I have enough on there that the site viewers are fine with this list. I don't think I need to add it. Then that's great, and we just move on and say thank you so much for responding. Devin, how do you approach that?
I'll look at the links that are actually on the links page and try to think about what does my client do that's different than these, because if you're literally identical to the links that are already on there, they have no reason to add yours. They already have that need, that whatever the issue is, they already have that covered. So I'm looking at the links page, trying to think, what can my site offer users of this page, of this site, that's unique and different to what's already there? Is there a question that isn't being answered? Is there any type of information or resource people are looking for that isn't currently listed there? And kind of whenever I'm outreaching to them, bringing that up. If our client has something that's extremely user-friendly, educational, free is always a plus, just things like that, I want to accent that in the email. I really want to just drive home, this is going to be better, it's going to add additional value to the page, this is why, and this is what it is, check it out. If you don't want to put it up, that's totally fine. It's your website, your call, but I really think it's going to add value to the site. And in the end, you want to keep your site users happy. So by putting this page up, it's going to add value.
Mm-hmm. That's such an important thing. And actually that dovetails into Michael's question here. So Michael says, what types of quid pro quos do you offer in exchange for a link? Or do you prefer solely to obtain links and strengths of content? Absolutely, 100% we go with strength of content and strength of the business, and kind of the business's function as part of society and part of as part of the relationship to the site that we're outreaching to. Quid pro quos, things like that. That's not really a good way to get links, in our opinion, and maybe there's some that disagree, but the real best relationships, because we're not link building, we're relationship building in a lot of ways, right? Because sites don't link to other sites, people link to other people, right? And doing a quid pro quo like I'll give you $5 or I'll give you a referral or I'll give you this is not the best way to kind of start off that relationship. But if somebody if they see your business's unique selling propositions and they think that you belong on their site, then that's the in. That's the way that you really want to go. Devin, you have something on that?
People definitely like talking to people when you're outreaching. One of our old coworkers, Tony Randall, would craft these kind of crazy emails. They'd be sometimes 2 or 3 paragraphs long, but he would really dig into the site he was reaching out to, go through their site and actually understand it, versus giving them some fluffy, oh, your site's really nice, I looked at your website, it's super cool, or just things like that. He actually went through and understood about their site, and he would outreach them, he would talk to them about it. I remember one time he sent out an email, he didn't even pitch the link in the first email, he just wanted to talk to them about their website, and he built up a relationship with them that way. And then he's like, oh, by the way, I also have this resource, you should check it out. And the person was super excited, they added it, but just kind of, I always look at stuff of when you're emailing sites for links, talk to them like normal people. Mm-hmm. How would you talk to people at a party or a social situation and kind of apply that to your email? It's the same thing when you outreach people and you sound super robotic and super stuffy. No one talks like that in real life. So don't talk like that in an email. Yeah.
That is great. Well, we are approaching the end of the hour here. In fact, it looks like it has already come upon us here. So the takeaways here, so we have 5 takeaways here. Use tools, but Google is also great. Boolean terms to kind of help narrow down, get the focus in there. Look for mentions, because mentions, the way that Google indexes, right, is the main index from just a regular Google search that includes everything may not necessarily have up-to-date kind of news mentions. So switch back and forth between news and all, although they're getting better, obviously, every day. Follow backlink trails. Look at where your competitors are getting links. Who's linking to your competitors? Because obviously, you know, if you have a better product and a better business than your competitors, then you deserve those links as well. You deserve good links from good sites. And so follow the backlinks, and then definitely monitor the metrics. Keep metrics in mind, but don't necessarily let them kind of guide every decision, at least based on a single metric point. Rather, use the mosaic. We do have time for a quick poll question here. I'm just going to send that out real quick as we get to our parting thoughts. And again, really great questions today. Really appreciate it here. So I'm just going to go and send out a poll. There we go. All right. So we just want to ask if you're interested in hearing more about what Page One Power can do for your business. Please let us know, and we're very happy to talk to you about link building and what we can do for you. And actually, we're offering other services now these days, including technical SEO audits, link building training, and on-site content is kind of something that we're exploring as well. So we have a lot of great, exciting products here at Page One Power. So we're always happy to talk with you about those. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. Thank you so much for voting. Excellent. And so Devin, parting thoughts.
Link building rocks, site finding's fun, and SEO is really cool.
Couldn't agree more. And as far as a parting thought is, don't be afraid to kind of go through and use Google and kind of make mistakes. There's no real perfect right way to kind of site find, but just kind of put yourself in the mindset of customers or clients for your business, and that will really kind of help you guide in your search and your link building. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I do appreciate it. This has been another edition of the Page One Power Panel Webinar Series. We are happy you could join us today. Recordings will be available on our website and on our YouTube channel shortly after this broadcast, along with our past webinars. Keep an eye out for more exciting webinars in the future from Page One Power, and remember, link unto others as they would link unto you.